Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Why Shorts. Today we're going to talk about law, the rule of law, and perhaps some of the controversy around the corruption of law. So join me as we get behind the why. Before we do that, let me ask you to hit that subscribe and like button so that you can stay in touch with us as we go through these conversations. When a new program drops, you'll be one of the first to get it. Also, go ahead and share this program with as many people as you can. Invite new voices, new minds, new trains of thought to join us in this conversation. So, going forward here today, talking about law, the first thing we want to do is I want to look at this in the guise of our Constitution, the supreme law of this land here in America. And in order to do that, I want to give a foundation first. So I want to talk about some principles of law. Me being a Christian, I find my guiding principles come from the Word of God. And so one of the things I find here is that when Jesus talked about law, now of course when he talked about law, he was talking about the Levitical code. But here I want to use the principle here. He said that he came not to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. So when we have law, remember law is the thing that guides us and keeps us. And then in Romans, when the Apostle Paul was talking, he talked about the fact that there are people who go around boasting. They're supposed to be keeping the law or managing the law, but they go around boasting about breaking the law. And when I hear that, I think about some of our legislative leaders and how they just thwart constitutional law and brag about doing it. And it makes me wonder why. Again, get behind the why. Why would someone do that? Why would someone be in a position of a lawmaker then boast about breaking the law? That kind of intrigued me. So we go on, we begin to think. And so what I did, me being me, of course, I went back to the book. As when I am in my Christian studies, I try to go back to the Bible to find out what's going on, because that's the rule, that's the authority. So when it came to this, the Constitution, I went to the Constitution. So let me read this to you. This is the preamble to the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, the word I want you to look at here is that to form a more perfect union. People have asked me the question, and I even did a broadcast on it. When was America ever great? And this is what makes America great, this foundation here. The idea was to make a more perfect union. It wasn't perfect. It's not perfect now. But because of the foundation that was laid, we have the ability to go forward to reach toward perfection. Now, one of the things that I have been really intrigued with here that just threw my mind for a loop was this whole discussion, this argument, should I say, around the appointing of a new Supreme Court justice. To me, it seems like a no-brainer in that Article 2 of the Constitution, under the powers of the president, he is ordered by the Constitution to make the nomination for the filling of that seat. So that's the law. That's the bottom line. He's ordered by the Constitution to do that. So why then would other legislators get upset about him doing what the law requires him to do? That's the part that makes me ask the question, why? Why are they upset about this? Now, I know that because of the way our government has been perverted, and to a large sense, I think it's been perverted. We talked about this a couple of shows ago, that our government is designed to have three prongs, right? The legislature, executive, and judicial. And when those three get compromised and we reduce it to two, we've really perverted what our government's supposed to look like. And so this idea of having liberal judges or conservative judges, to my mind, is really where the perversion smells the most, because the judicial has to be the one that sits in the middle. That's the one that has to be constitutional. You can't be liberal, you can't be conservative, but constitutional. And that's where we have perverted and got off track. So with that being said, I go back to, well, with the president having made his nomination, why are we arguing against that? You know, and so many other things come to mind when I hear these people talking about they don't want to do this, they don't do that. There was this big argument about the Electoral College for a while. Let me read this to you. I went and looked this up because I wanted to make sure that I had my facts straight. Let me just read this to you about the Electoral College, because I know off the top of my head what the Electoral College is and what it does, but I want to read this to you. This is from Alexander Hamilton. He said, Alexander Hamilton explained that the election was to take place among the states, so no corruption in any state could taint the great body of the people in their selection. The choice was to be made by a majority of the Electoral College, as majority rule is critical to the principles of Republican government. Now, the key thing we want to remember by that is not Republican Party, but a Republican government. That is intended, it means a representative government. So we have people in Washington, D.C. who's supposed to be representing us here. He goes on, he says, another consideration was that the decision would be made without tumult and disorder. It would be a broad-based one made simultaneously in various locales around the decisions, where the decision makers could deliberate reasonably, not in one place where decision makers could be threatened or intimidated. So what he's saying is that in all the states, these electorates would be having their discussion and then make their vote all at the same time. So no one group could get in there and intimidate them. Now, James Madison came along behind and wrote in the Federalist paper, number 10, he said, an interested and overbearing majority and the mischiefs of faction in an electoral system. He defined a faction as a number of citizens, whether amounting to a majority or a minority of the whole, who are united to actuate by some common impulse of passion or interest adverse to the rights of other citizens or to the permanent and aggregate interests of the community. So we find here is that the Electoral College was established to keep corruption at bay. Because if we had I've heard some of our Democrat leaders in particular arguing that we should get rid of the Electoral College. Again, why are you trying to destroy the law? Why is it that lawmakers want to destroy the law? And we see here that the purpose would be so that they could corrupt the election. That's the only reason. That's the reason the Electoral College was established, so that no one group of people could control it all. So you think about it, if we went strictly on population, the two most populous states are New York and California. Slightly behind them, I think, is, I want to say Florida is number 3. I have to double check that. But when you think about a pure population vote, then what you'd have is that those who are seeking power, seeking to stay in power, would only have to contend with those 1 or 2, possibly 3 people. California, New York, and Florida. That's it. The rest of us, what they call flyover country, whether it be Alabama, Idaho, Iowa, not Iowa, I was in the middle of there, Missouri, all those places where people just have a tendency to just go over you, they could do that without even care, because you wouldn't have a voice. So again, we go back to this idea of law. I mean, Jesus said that he came to establish the law. Paul said that law was a good thing. That the only real bad thing about the law was that it came to be kind of like a hammer against those who are violators of the law. So when you obey the law, you don't have anything to worry about. Now, there will be always those who argue and say, but yeah, there's a whole lot of this with police this and police that. And I'm not going to argue and say it won't, because you know what? There are people who are bad in any ilk of life, It's just the way it works. But overall, the law is for our good. So when we have our leaders sitting back wondering and trying to tear down the rule of law, you have to ask yourself why. When you have newscasters on prominent news stations telling you to get rid of the Electoral College and all this, you have to ask yourself why. Why are these people so interested in you not having the protection of the law? Because here's the question. If you and I can favor the law being destroyed when it hurts our enemy, what happens when it turns on us? Then we don't have the law to protect us. So before we jump aboard this wagon about let's destroy the law, let's destroy the Constitution, let's blow it up, let's cut it up in pieces, we better sit back and ask ourselves, where would we be today if we didn't have that Constitution? If it wasn't for the 13th Amendment, where would we be today? Think about it. I'm just asking you to get behind the why. Don't be the sucker. No, take time. Understand what they're saying to you. Listen, hear, and then do the research. Get online, look it up, see what the law says. Because in this case, when you're walking in the light, the law is on your side. So until next time, God bless you. Peace, love you. Remember, get behind the why.